Did you know that Canada's economy is sitting on a ticking time bomb? According to recent statistics, Canada's national debt has ballooned to over 1.2 trillion. At the same time, environmental disasters are becoming more frequent and more devastating than ever. Floods, wildfires, and record breaking heat waves are pushing our infrastructure to its limits. These two forces, economic instability and environmental crisis, are colliding, and the impact could be catastrophic. The question is, are we ready? Welcome back. Today, we're tackling one of the most critical topics we've ever discussed on this channel: Canada's impending collapse. I know it sounds dramatic, but the truth is, Canada is facing some serious challenges that could threaten not only our economy, but also the environment we depend on. These aren't distant abstract problems, they are happening right now, and consequences could be severe. So, why should we care? Because the decision we make today will determine the future of this country for generations to come. Let's start by looking at the big picture. Canada's economy has always been one of the strongest assets, thriving industries, and standard of living. We're known for our vast natural resources. That's the envy of many nations. But in recent years, cracks have started to show. Inflation is on the rise, making everything from groceries to housing more expensive. Canada's housing market is now one of the least affordable in the world. For many Canadians, the dream of owning a home is slipping out of their reach. At the same time, our national debt continues to grow. We're borrowing more and more to maintain the standard of living, but at what cost? Eventually, the debt has to be repaid, and when the bills come due, it would trigger a financial crisis that impacts every single Canadian. Now, let's turn into the environment. Canada is no stranger to extreme weather, but in recent years, things have escalated. Wildfires have ravaged entire provinces, flooding has displaced thousands, and our Arctic region are warming at an alarming rate. These environmental disasters are becoming more frequent and more severe, putting immense pressure on our infrastructure and costing billions in recovery efforts. The scary part: these problems aren't isolated, they're interconnected. The economic instability makes it harder to fund solutions for environmental crises, and environmental crises are making it more expensive to maintain a stable economy. It's a vicious cycle, and if we don't act soon, it could spiral out of control. Now, let's dig a little deeper into what's causing these issues. First, we need to talk about the role of political decisions. Government policies, both past and present, play a huge part of where we find ourselves today. When it comes to economy, decisions around interest rates, taxation, and fiscal policies are crucial. For example, Canada has kept interest rates low for years to stimulate the growth. While this happened in the short term, it also fueled a housing bubble that has made home ownership unaffordable for millions of Canadians. On environmental front, Canada has struggled to find balance between economic growth and sustainability. Our dependence on fossil fuels, particularly in the province of Alberta, has been a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's driven economic growth, but on the other hand, it's contributing to our environmental decline. Efforts to move towards greener energy sources have been slow and met with resilience from industries and are deeply entrenched in the old way of doing things. Climate change is a major factor too. Canada is warming at a rate twice as fast as the global average, and we're already feeling the effects, from shrinking ice caps to longer wildfire seasons, and the evidence all around us. The problem is we're not moving fast enough to address it. Climate change isn't just an environmental issue, it's a social and economic one as well. It's leading to food shortages, increasing health risks, and putting pressure on the already strained public service. Social issues also play a role in this crisis. As the wealth gap grows, more people are left behind. There's an increasing sense of frustration and disillusionment with the government. This leads to political polarizing, making it even harder to reach a consensus on how to solve these problems. We're seeing more division, less cooperation, and a lack of long term vision. So, where does that leave us? The truth is, Canada is a crossroad. We're facing a critical moment, and the decision made in that next few years will determine the future of this country. The upcoming federal election is one of the most important in our history. Will we elect leaders who are willing to take bold action on climate change and economy reform, or will we continue down the path of short term fixes and kick the can down the road? But it's not just about politics. Business communities and individuals are all a role to play. We need to rethink how we live, work, and consume resources. If we continue with the businesses as usual, the consequences will be dire. But if we seize this moment and make the right choices with this hope, we can stabilize the economy, reduce our environmental impact, and build a more equitable society. It all comes down to this. Are we willing to make the tough choices now to avoid a catastrophe later? Because if we don't, the collapse isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Let's take a step back and look at some of the historical context that got us here. Over the past few decades, Canada has enjoyed relatively prosperity thanks to a part of the abundant natural resources. Oil, gas, timber, and minerals have been a backbone of our economy, creating jobs and funding public services. But as the global economy shifts towards renewable energy and sustainability, our reliance on fossil fuels is becoming liability. In Alberta, for example, the oil sands have been a major economic driver, but they're also one of the largest contributors to Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. The federal government has been walking a tightrope, on one hand trying to support these industries to keep the economy afloat, and on the other hand pledging to reduce emissions and transition to greener energy. This balancing act is unsustainable, and at some point we're going to have to make a choice. Another factor is globalization. Canada's economy is deeply integrated with the global market, and we're vulnerable to shocks that happen outside our borders. The COVID 19 pandemic exposed just how fragile the global supply chains can be. We saw shortages in everything from medical supplies to basic goods, and economic fallout was devastating. As we move forward, we need to build a more resilient economy that can withstand these kinds of shocks. And then there's the social aspect. Canada always prides itself on being a fair and just society, but the reality is inequality is growing. The rich are getting richer while the middle class struggles to keep up with the rising costs. Wages have stagnated while housing and healthcare became more expensive. This growing divide is fueling social unrest and is creating a sense of instability that could have long term consequences. So, where does this all leave us? Canada is facing a perfect storm of economic, environmental, and social challenges that could collapse if we don't take action. The choices we make in the next few years will determine whether we can turn things around or whether we'll be left to pick up the pieces. The stakes are high, but it's not too late. Now it's your turn. What do you think Canada's future holds? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out my other videos on economic bubbles have led past recessions. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's work together to build a better future.